Outpost Epsilon, 6 died in silence. There were no distress flares, no last transmissions, no screams etched into the void. Only static. One moment. The outpost was a humming nerve center of Earth's interstellar expansion, nestled on the mineral-rich moon Ravenous Theta. The next it was gone as though swallowed whole by the black. The loss stunned Earth's central command, but not because they didn't expect it. Epsilon 6 was a beacon, a challenge lit defiantly in Zanari space, and everyone knew the collective would come. What shocked them was how fast it happened. Orbital footage, grainy, partial, corrupted, showed fragments. A shimmer in low orbit, atmospheric compression flashes, then fire falling like rain. Zanari cruisers emerged from dark space without warning, bypassing Earth's defense net with technologies humanity couldn't yet decode. They unleashed a precision strike that lasted only 4 minutes. When it ended, the outpost lay in ruin, buried under shattered alloy, burnt stone, and the bodies of its defenders. Earth mourned. The news feeds broadcast memorials, brave faces of technicians and soldiers, smiling in old crew photos, now martyrs of the void. But behind closed doors, Central Command didn't mourn. It planned. War with the Zanari had never been a question of fairness. It was survival against a race that believed in conquest by superiority. The collective viewed humans as clever animals, dangerous perhaps, but primitive, impulsive, and ultimately beneath serious attention. Epsilon 6 had been a warning. The Zanari were done tolerating Earth's expansion. In a chamber buried beneath the Andes, high above sea level and away from the espionage satellites of rival systems, Earth's commanders debated retaliation. Full military recapture was out of the question. Their fleet was stretched in across the Orion corridor, holding back Zanari incursions near colony worlds more valuable than a remote mining station. Political leaders wanted a symbol, a gesture of strength without the risk of escalation. But one voice, cold and clipped, cut through the table noise. "Don't retake it," said General Arya Volan. "Break it from the inside." The room quieted. She placed the data core on the steel table and activated it. A dossier unfolded in holographic blue. Body scans, mission records, simulation results, and a single line of redacted information. No name, no rank, just a call sign, Ghost. Volan continued. "You want symbolism? Send in a legend. Let the Zanari know humans bleed, yes, but we cut back. Quietly, precisely, and permanently." A vote was taken within the hour. 2 abstained. The rest agreed. The mission was designated Operation Scythe. 3 days later, a stealth pod slipped free from a destroyer near the Agar Belt, its signal masked by asteroid scatter and solar radiation. Inside, in cryo-silence, floated Earth's last contingency. Not a soldier anymore, not since the Lisbon collapse. Just a man with half-metal bones, ocular implants tuned to heat signatures through 5 layers of armor, and a trigger discipline tested on 6 worlds. He had no team. He needed none. As he awoke from cryo-sleep, his vitals spiked then steadied. He didn't speak. He didn't ask questions. He read the briefing embedded in his retinal HUD. Eliminate enemy command at Epsilon 6. Untraceable, unmourned, unstoppable. His reply was a blink that triggered one word in return. Acknowledged. Below him, Epsilon 6 loomed in the distance. Once human design with utilitarian geometry and defensive symmetry, it now pulsed with alien modifications. Organic shapes grafted onto steel, bioluminescent towers sprouting where radar dishes once stood. Zanari forces had taken it, yes, but they were rebuilding it into something unrecognizable. A hub, a staging ground. Inside those towers, General Kark, the Zanari commandant of Sector Theta, had made his lair, an apex strategist among his kind. Kark believed in psychological dominance as much as military force. His first decree after the conquest was to leave a single human survivor alive, chained in the center square, broadcast daily as he slowly wasted away. No words, just a message. This is what we do to ghosts. The pod broke atmosphere silently, shielded by counter-gravity buffers. It landed in the northern debris fields outside the outpost perimeter, far from the new sensors and automated sentries. Ghost stepped out and into the ash-thick winds. His armor bore no insignia. His rifle was matte black, its barrel swaddled in carbon mesh. He moved like a whisper, breath synchronized with his heart rate, footsteps finding every patch of silence the world still held. Above, the stars flickered beyond polluted sky. Below, the hunted didn't yet know the hunter had arrived. The sniper set his first blind beneath the shattered remains of Fusion's silo, calibrating his scope with the ambient magnetic interference. He watched patrols move in formation, drones with pulse rifles, Zanari infantry with insectal limbs and iridescent skin, all scanning, arrogant, sure they had crushed humanity here. They walked with the lazy confidence of victors. They had no reason to fear. Not yet. Ghost zeroed in on the first sentry, a spotter station near the southern wall, facing away from cover. Too easy. He didn't take the shot. Not tonight. Let them grow used to silence. Let their vigilance fray. He had time. Patience was his greatest weapon. In the darkness, his fingers brushed the grip of his rifle. A fragment of memory sparked, warmth, laughter, a child's voice saying, "Daddy, be careful this time." Then nothing. Emotion was a luxury he'd long buried, but sometimes it returned like an echo in the chamber. He blinked it away. The mission had begun, and the outpost, though it didn't know it yet, was about to bleed from the inside. The air was thinner near the northern ridge, tainted with scorched alloys and the metallic sting of oxidized blood. Ghost crouched in the skeletal remains of an old maintenance tower, watching perimeter lights sweep across the wreckage. He'd been planetside for 16 hours, and already the patterns were revealing themselves. Drones looped in lazy arcs, infantry moved in threes, and sensor nodes blinked in imperfect synchronization. The Zanari were meticulous in construction, but careless in occupation. They believed the threat was over. That belief would cost them. His optics adjusted silently, zooming in on a patrol 200 meters downwind. The wind was favorable, visibility low. Their thermal output betrayed them, humanoid shapes glowing orange against a violet sky. One lingered too long beneath a support arch. A mistake. He adjusted his rifle, held his breath, and didn't fire. It wasn't time. Discipline was everything. Any kill made now was a message, and Ghost had learned in the ruins of Lisboa that the first message had a scream. He moved through the outpost's husk like vapor, sliding between fractured walls and half-melted barricades. Each step calculated. He found shelter in forgotten ducts and collapsed storage bays, building mental maps, cross-referencing patrols, and marking patterns. This wasn't just infiltration, it was architecture. He was rebuilding the outpost from its bones, not to restore it, but to turn it into a grave. At dusk, he entered the old comms chamber, now gutted and overgrown with biotechnic growths, Zanari tendrils pulsing faintly against the cold steel. In the center stood the mangled corpse of the outpost chief operator, bolted upright in mock salute. A crude placard hung from his neck. "Observe human ingenuity." Ghost stared at it for several seconds, then turned and climbed into the rafters. They didn't understand what ingenuity really meant. He made camp in the skeleton of a broken uplink dish, high enough to scan troop movement, low enough to vanish under their sensor threshold. He slept in 3-minute increments, shifting position after each cycle. He ate nutrient packs with no flavor and drank from cooling condensers. Time blurred. Missions like this always eroded the sense of days. There was only the pulse of strategy, the beat of the kill waiting to be born. The first target was chosen not for value, but for voice. Sergeant Kalik, a Zanari handler known for barking orders loud enough to rattle sheet metal, died without sound. One shot through the eye stalk at 700 meters while he berated a drone for stumbling. He crumpled mid-word. The shot came from a ruined cooling tower half a click away, but by the time the guards reached it, Ghost was already in the supply depot ruins, rigging a power coil to overload. 3 hours later, the explosion flattened the prefab barracks and charred 3 officers. Still no trace. No bullet casings. No thermal prints. Just smoke and panic. By the next cycle, Ghost noticed a shift. Patrols doubled. Randomized intervals replaced fixed rotations. The Zanari deployed aerial sweepers, large floating constructs that howled low across the landscape, sniffing for movement and electromagnetic signatures. He welcomed it. The more they hunted, the more mistakes they made, the more resources they wasted, the more control he gained. Fear, he knew, was the slow poison that undid armies. That night, he hacked into a salvageable interface buried beneath rubble and accessed the internal frequency bands. It wasn't easy. Zanari encryption required bypassing algorithms that mutated like DNA. But his implant adapted. He accessed the internal feeds, recorded enemy chatter, and rebroadcast them in a loop whisper on their command net. One is watching. One is listening. One is here. Within 12 hours, a platoon commander executed his own subordinate for suspected treachery. By day 5, Ghost was legend. They called him the smoke between walls. Others whispered of a cursed earth spirit, risen from the ashes to reclaim its dead. Ghost neither confirmed nor denied. He carved symbols into walls, untranslated glyphs with no meaning except the one they invented. Soldiers refused to patrol alone. Drones scanned shadows and fired at nothing. General Kark issued public denouncements, declaring the human behind the attacks a remnant, a failed saboteur delaying the inevitable. But behind his rage, Kark accelerated his defenses. More guards were stationed near the command spire. Construction paused. Engineers left tasks half-finished. The outpost was beginning to stagnate. Ghost watched and waited, and bled from his right side, where a shrapnel splinter had embedded beneath his ribs. He'd taken it during his second explosive trap. Unexpected blowback when a fuel cell ruptured. He hadn't flinched. He hadn't screamed. But now infection threatened. He sterilized the wound with microflame, biting down on leather to keep from making sound. His jaw ached from it. Pain was irrelevant. He reviewed the map for the 8th time that day. He could see the pattern now. Kark never stayed in one location for more than 4 hours, but every 2 days he visited the central plaza, always with the same 10 guards, always beneath the ruined statue of the Outpost founder, a place symbolic to humans, a place chosen for its irony. That would be the place. The shot would be nearly impossible. The line of sight was obstructed, crosswinds unpredictable, and the new signal jamming tower would render smart bullets useless. It would need to be manual, ballistic, ancient. He closed his eyes. The next move would end this, or would end him. The mission didn't allow for retreat. It never had. He opened his eyes and began disassembling his rifle. Every piece was polished, reweighted, rebalanced. He adjusted for atmosphere density, accounted for bullet drop at extreme range. His mind calculated, refined, confirmed. Precision was poetry in this profession. He would write his verse in gunpowder. Outside, the Zanari gathered in tighter circles, watching the sky now, hoping salvation would come from above. They didn't know death had always been beneath them. The plaza reeked of ritual and rot. Burnt incense coiled from alien braziers, mixing with a faint ozone of active force fields. Zanari officers stood in rigid formation, their armor chitinous and iridescent under the dim moons of ravenous Theta. At their center loomed General Kark, broad-shouldered and cold-eyed, encased in a matte exosuit reinforced with living muscle tissue harvested from genetically spliced war beasts. His mere presence cast a shadow over his subordinates. He didn't speak often, but when he did, units shifted planetary alignments to obey. Now he paced. "For days, you let one human cripple our command center," he growled, voice amplified through organic amplifiers embedded in his throat. "A primitive, a ghost, and you answer me with excuses?" No one responded. Kark stopped before Commander Trazel, the plaza's head security officer. The smaller alien tried to stand taller, mandibles twitching nervously. "We underestimated him." Trazel offered. Kark raised a single hand. A thin pulse of bioelectricity sparked from his fingertips, clean and surgical. Trazel's eyes flared once before his body collapsed, lifeless. "Adjust your estimates." The other officers did not flinch. They had seen worse. What troubled them wasn't the execution. It was the pattern. The human was winning. Subtly, quietly, but undeniably. Since the first strike, 6 officers had been killed, for tower sabotage and morale shattered. Soldiers now triple-checked every corridor. Entire patrol squads refused assignments without drone cover. Ammunition reserves had mysteriously detonated overnight. None had seen the shooter. None could predict his movements. The sniper was not just a killer. He was a contagion. Kark turned away from the corpse and gestured toward the floating tactile interface now hovering beside him. He's forcing us into a reactive posture. That ends now. He activated projection. The sniper's pattern of strikes, reassembled from partial forensic data. Points of contact. Trajectories. Timing. The conclusion was maddening. Ghost moved without logic, sometimes appearing twice in zones separated by kilometers within an impossible time frame. But Karka's mind was sharper than most. He saw something buried in the chaos. Not randomness, but adaptation. Strategy disguised as unpredictability. He tapped his claw on the map. He has limits. We force exposure. We feign weakness. And when he reveals himself, we strike with everything. That night, a decoy patrol unit moved through the blast zone, a deliberately vulnerable configuration. No aerial cover. Open lanes. A perfect target. They wore distinctive helmets, mimicking officer ranks, and walked in visible formation. Every step was tracked from a nearby sniper tower, now occupied by 3 elite Zanari scouts. But the kill never came. Instead, a timed detonation collapsed the sniper tower beneath them. Ghost had already mapped the area 2 days prior. He hadn't fallen for the trap. He had set it. From a shattered power substation a kilometer away, Ghost watched the blaze erupt. The false patrol scattered in panic, real officers converging on the wrong coordinates. The general's plan had folded before it began. Ghost didn't smile. He didn't smile anymore, but his breathing slowed in satisfaction. He was bleeding again. The shrapnel wound had reopened during his last vault. He tore a length of insulation cord and wrapped it tight across his abdomen. There was no time for rest now. Kark had escalated, and so would he. He moved under cover of chemical fog, leaving false tracks with magnetic decoys, and reached the drone hangar by pre-dawn. The facility was lightly guarded. 2 technicians, 1 brute enforcer. It wasn't enough. Ghost picked them off silently, dropped from a broken beam with a blade through soft cartilage, and then set to work. He wasn't just there to destroy drones. He intended to use them. Within minutes, he'd hacked into guidance system, rerouted targeting protocols, and reprogrammed 2 units with corrupted visual identifiers. They would now see Zanari heat signatures as hostile. He sent them on a pre-plotted patrol route and watched the chaos unfold on a stolen HUD interface. By midday, 7 soldiers were dead from friendly fire. Command suspended drone operations indefinitely. Back at the command spire, General Kark was losing patience. He issued a public address, broadcast on all channels, even those jammed to local resistance frequencies. His image flickered through static, towering above the Outpost plaza. To the human hiding in our ruins, he said, voice low and sharp, you are not a predator. You are not righteous. You are alone, and you will die, not as a hero, but as an echo. Ghost watched from the shadowed rafters of a broken barracks, his scope trained not on Kark, but on the wide field behind him, marking wind speed and gravitational anomalies. He recorded the broadcast. Then he rewound it. Kark visited the plaza every 2 days. Always stood near the same point. His position was never perfectly centered. 5 meters off axis, always to the left of the broken statue, favoring his dominant eyesight line. The speech had been posturing, but it had also been routine. Ghost knew routines. Routines could be broken or used. He examined his rifle again. He needed a better line of sight. He limped his way to the old comms relay, half buried under rubble, but still intact at its highest point. Its elevation granted the angle he required, but the structure was unstable. Any shot would have to be taken fast, before the vibrations from the recoil brought the ceiling down. There was a problem. Karka's broadcasts were shielded with interference now. Smart rounds wouldn't lock. Guidance was useless. The jamming tower nearby would scramble anything electric beyond iron sights. This would be a manual shot, the kind you trained for, but never believed you'd have to make. He retrieved a relic from his pack, a solid-core tungsten round. No tech, just physics and pressure, the kind that cracked bones in history. He didn't sleep that night. He watched the stars instead, counting them like old names. His thoughts drifted, uninvited, to his daughter's voice, reading off constellations back on Earth before the war had started, before he became Ghost. The thought passed. Morning came. Tomorrow, the general would speak again, and the Ghost would answer. The comms relay tower loomed like a dying finger pointing toward the stars. Wind tore across its rusted framework, rattling loose bolts and warping the last remnants of Earth's old steel against the alien atmosphere. Ghost lay prone near the apex, cradled in shadow. Beneath him, the ruins of Outpost Epsilon. 6 stretched like broken ribs across the black rock. The enemy had painted over human design with organic Zanari growths. Sinewy tendrils, bioluminescent spires, banners soaked in pheromone-coated dominance. But today, that paint would peel. Ghost exhaled slowly. 1,000 meters. Line of sight narrow. Obstruction minimal but not irrelevant. He'd spent the last 72 hours calculating this shot from 3 potential angles. This one was most dangerous, but it was also the only one that offered certainty. The jamming tower nearby would disable any guided projectile. Smart bullets, sensors, predictive recoil, all of it was dead weight here. This would be manual. This would be ancient. He opened the sealed pouch tucked into the small of his back. Inside, a single tungsten core round. Heavy, inert, immaculate. No markings. No electronics. Just mass and intent. He slid it into the chamber. The click loud in the intimacy of his scope. The crowd began to gather below. Zanari units filled the plaza in synchronized columns, armor reflecting the cold burn of twin moons. Each movement precise, ritualized, an empire performing certainty. Drones hovered in a perfect grid overhead. Surveillance arrays aimed outward, not up. It was a ceremony of victory, but also of reinforcement. They needed to believe this place was untouchable again. At the center of it all stood General Kark. Ghost artificial eyes zoomed in, sharpening detail. Kark was larger now, bulked with recent augmentations, plated in armor that fused living tissue with forged metals. His presence was as brutal as it was symbolic. Every step he took across the podium was measured dominance, a visual declaration. This was no longer contested ground. This was collective territory. The holoscreen behind him pulsed to life. Broadcast frequencies scattered across occupied systems. Karka's voice boomed, processed and translated for 1,000 ears. To all who serve the Zanari Collective, he said, raising his arms, let this moment stand in galactic memory. Humanity's outpost has fallen. Its last defiance has been consumed. Ghost steadied his breath. Wind speed, 12 kilometers per hour westward. Distance, 968 meters. Gravity drift, minimal. Adjust. Compensate. Wait. This place will serve as a symbol, Carr continued, that the age of Earth is over, that resistance is not noble, it is extinction. Heartbeat slowed. Muscle memory aligned spine to rifle. Trigger pressure, 2 ounces. Exhale. Then silence. The shot cracked the air like a whip from God. For a moment, everything paused. Then the top of Karka's skull burst open in a jagged bloom of bone and synthetic sinew. His body jerked, convulsed once, and fell backward over podium. The plaza erupted into chaos. Officers ducked, shouting. Troops scattered. Drones began evasive spirals, scanning the sky, searching for the impossible. The whole screen stuttered, distorted, then blinked out. Across the galaxy, the stream cut to black. Ghost was already moving. He dismantled the rifle in seconds, stuffing each part into separate magnetic compartments across his suit. He dropped off the relay's side, slamming against a metal beam with a grunt. The fall tore open his bandaged side again. Warmth bloomed under his armor. He staggered, forced breath into his lungs, and limped into the shattered skeleton of the maintenance hub. Pursuit wouldn't take long. He had prepared for that. He reached the access shaft where his final gift waited. A microfusion core wired to a directional blast grid, hidden beneath what used to be the secondary coolant lines. He slid to his knees beside it and keyed in the final sequence. The device blinked to life, its pulsing heart warm against his palm. Outside, Zanari drones closed in. Troops formed a perimeter. They would descend into this ruin in minutes, if not seconds. But they wouldn't find what they were hoping for. Ghost leaned back against the wall, lungs raw, eyes flickering under the weight of blood loss and exhaustion. He watched the light of the fusion core cycle from blue to red. It was quiet here, not peaceful, but meaningful. A small part of him, the human part, buried beneath scar tissue and kill orders, thought of Earth, not the military Earth, not the command briefings and resistance cells, but home, the voice of his daughter, the smell of old rain, a promise whispered once across a vidcom screen. Come back safe, okay? He hadn't, but he'd come back useful. He closed his eyes. When the detonation came, it didn't echo. It consumed. The relay, the plaza, the spire, all of it caved inward like a dying breath. 8 days later, Earth's recon team landed on a ghost world. The outpost was abandoned, the Zanari gone. Surveillance logs showed their withdrawal had started within 48 hours of the general's death. Confusion turned to fear. Fear turned to retreat. Not just here, across 5 sectors. The shot had traveled farther than anyone expected. They found his body under the relay debris, still intact, cradled beside the shattered fusion core. He had stayed with it, made sure. The dossier was updated. Mission, Operation Scythe. Status, executed. Operative, deceased in action. Success probability estimate, 3%. But outside official channels, story spread. Of the sniper who ended a war with 1 bullet. Of the ghost who bled alone to bring a fortress to its knees. Years later, in a forward resistance base on Delta 9, a recruit found a corrupted file in an archive. It showed a grainy image, half static, half silhouette, of a man aiming from the heights above a burning skyline. No name, no voice, just an action, just a choice. She studied it. Then she reached for her own rifle and whispered to no one, for the ghosts, and kept walking forward.